Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm so excited for tonight. It is our kickoff event for our Elephant We Don't See Diversity Dialogue series for calendar year 2023. This series has been a partnership between our office, the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights, and the Prince George's County Memorial Library System since 2020, in the very early days of the pandemic. That makes this then the fourth year of this series, which has covered a huge number of books and tackles many, many, many complex issues. Tonight, we're honoring Black History Month. We look at Maryland and American history as we discuss a narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, Frederick Douglass's autobiography. I'm really excited about our conversation tonight because not only am I joined once again by colleagues Jose Villegas and Executive Director Renee Battlebrooks with the Office of Human Rights, but we welcome back a very special guest, Michelle Hamill. Michelle was formerly COO of the Prince George's County Memorial Library System and was the original co-host with me of this series, which we did together for 2020, 2021, and half of 2022. Michelle took a new career opportunity and left the library system last summer, and so it's a real honor to welcome her back to the Elephant We Don't See Diversity Dialogue, a series and a conversation that would not even exist in the first place if it was not for her. So Michelle, it is a thrill to have you. Thank you so much for being with us. And everyone, thank you for joining us tonight.
I am so happy to be here. You just don't know. I'm bursting.
Yay. This is, we are thrilled. We are thrilled that you are back. So, what an amazing book, right? What an amazing book. And for those who may not have the background or the context, this book was written by Frederick Douglass himself, a slave in Maryland. And this was written approximately 180 years ago. These are his words. It doesn't get any better than that. It doesn't get any clearer than that. And so tonight we are going to talk about his story, what he said, not interpreted by anyone. And I have lots of questions for us as a panel because I see so many correlations between today, 180 years later. And it's, anyway, so that's just the background. We encourage everyone to check this out in the library or buy it. Fantastic. So there we go. This is the original 1845 edition of the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, the most photographed person of his day. I don't know if you guys knew that because I have a question about that. I know that. Why? Because Maryland Public TV. This actually, it's a phenomenal book, and there's been a lot of work done on his life. So just store that because I'm going to ask you a question about that. But the most photographed man in that era. So I guess I'll start off by what did you guys think of the preface, first of all, and then the introduction? A lot of times I skip, but it was so important for me, sort of for the foundation. So the preface was written by William Lloyd Garrison, Boston, May 1st, 1845. And he did not mince words at all. I mean, he was a little bit harder to understand just because he wrote in such flowery terms of his time, but he basically called everybody out. 16 years before the Civil War, this is what, they're debating and talking, not debating, but just saying, this is horrific. This is not in line with anybody who claims, to be a Christian. This is, a cursed thing. This is horrible. And I just wanted to read one thing from the preface. To me, sounded an awful lot like today and sort of the willful ignorance with the term woke when people use it in a derogatory way. So let me just read this. They do not deny that the slaves are held as property, but that terrible fact seems to convey to their minds no idea of injustice, exposure to outrage or savage barbarity. tell them of cruel scourgings, of mutilations and brandings, of scenes of pollution and blood, of the banishment of all light and knowledge, and they affect to be greatly indignant at such erroneous exaggerations, such wholesale misstatements, and such abominable libels on the character of the Southern planters. What do you guys think? I mean, I thought, wow, he just, yeah. I mean, he goes on to really talk about basically, but to me, when I read that, it's like, oh yeah, this is willful ignorance, not unlike where we are today, honestly.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in the preface that stood out for me is he says that this narrative contains many affecting incidents, many passages of great eloquence and power. But I think the most thrilling one of them all is the description Douglass gives of his feelings as he stood soliloquying, respecting his fate and the chances of his one day being a free man on the banks of the Chesapeake Bay. Yeah. The fact that a slave could write with eloquence and power.
Yeah.
And all that, I mean, this book, you did say that it reminded you of what was happening today. And I think there are many themes in the book. But to be such a prolific writer in the 1800s as a slave, who learned to read and learned to write on his own.
That's right.
Because he was taught his ABCs, but learned to read basically on his own.
That's right.
And then to have something that's meaningful and powerful today. And I just wonder, I did not have a chance to look. I don't know if any of, if this book has been banned. I'm sure it has somewhere.
Yeah. I had that same thought. Yeah.
That certainly in the whole cancel culture movement, somebody has said that children cannot read this book. High schoolers cannot read this book.
Yeah. It, it also made me just throughout the whole thing, his, as you said, the eloquence and the thoughtfulness and the conclusions that he reached, right? When we think about, and maybe they don't call it this anymore, but in college, the big debate about nurture or nature, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He had neither nurture
That's
and
right.
the environment was not too, right? And so how this remarkable person came from something that the odds were so against.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not even against, it was unfathomable. So, what makes a man great? Clearly it's not nature or nurture,
Right.
in this instance. Yeah. Anyway, I have so much, but Jose, Kyla, what do you guys think?
Well, did you see Nick's comment? I'm sorry.
I didn't.
Yeah, I'll share. So I also Googled, but I'm no librarian, so Nick's much faster on the Google than me. It is on multiple ban lists, and so Nick noted in the comments that it's on multiple. There's it's in prisons, also in different states. In 2022, that I saw, it looked like it had been banned in Oklahoma and Illinois. It looks like 2019 that it was banned in 2019 in Illinois and the prison system. So it seems like it's a great question that you asked. It seems like it is one that makes the list frequently.
Doesn't it make sense it would be banned in prisons?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, to me, yes. And I think overall, I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot, and this is an old retread for anyone who's listened to me talk at all, is I think that our complete denial of our history. And I think one of the things in Maryland, I mean, I live in Maryland, but I think what's relevant here is I'm also from Canada. So I have a lot of experience in being around people who look down on people who live in a more southerly place than they do. And in Canada, I mean, no disrespect to my Canadian brothers and sisters who don't do this, but many of us, it's kind of a cultural phenomena to talk about bad things that happen in the United States as a way to not look at our own selves. And I think that in Maryland, I've heard in Maryland, people in Maryland talk about other southern states, other slaveholding states as being bad, or say, I wouldn't go to a slave state. I mean, I've heard all of these things from people who live in the same community as me. And it's like, you live I mean, you can't live in Maryland and be from the home of Frederick Douglass and the home of Harriet Tubman and then say that you were too good to live in or visit or go to slave states, because that is denying a very real reality. And I think a very real reality, I just said that, that's amazing. So I think that one of the things about this book is like, it's not, this is what, you know, in my introduction, I said it's Maryland history, it's American history. And I think that it's difficult for people. It continues to be difficult, even in 2023, for people to really accept that their history happened. It happened here. It happened with and to and from their people, depending on who they are, and that they're choosing to live in the space where these things happen. And I think it's much easier for us. And the reason I mentioned Canada is I see it's not just in Maryland, it's across populations. We want to look at the other and not look at ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think probably one of the issues dealing with that, Kyla, I mean, because you raised a kind of a interesting point, because even in my recollection in school, if dealing with the history, American history, kind of concentrated in what was the Confederate States, right? And that did not include Maryland as an official, even though that's. So we have that idea that Maryland was not as bad, probably, as the southern state. I'm not using the correct word, but not as bad as the other state, because of what the history that we learn in school dealing with what the Confederate States were and how they acted. And it's always the southern state. But you're right. I mean, to me, I believe I've read this book a long time ago. However, I don't. I think I had to read in one of my African American literature class that I took a long time ago. But just reading it again for this is. I think I had this briefly conversation with Ms. Mato today, is that this book should not be banned anywhere, right? Because I mean, you can debate whether other people have written some books or written history, but this is a autobiography of a person that went through certain actions, and so I mean, if we get into the point of banning autobiographies, then I mean we are really bad.
Mhm.
It's funny you should say about sort of Maryland. Remember, in the book, it really talks about, it's either the introduction or the preface, about how compelling this book is. This is, again, 1844. These are the words in 1844, because Maryland was seen as a moderate place or a good place if you were a slave. It wasn't like those other places, right? And so to hear his own story and the horrifying things that happened here in a place where it was good to be a slave, right? You weren't treated nearly as bad. So it's fascinating. And I agree. I don't understand how you can ban a book that is truth. It's not somebody's interpretation.
Yeah.
Well,
and touching on that, Ms. Rodriguez, in terms of he kind of described different actions that were taking place against a slave within the state of Maryland, right? Because there was certain experience in Eastern Shore, and then certain experience of people living in Baltimore in the city, and how different they were treated, even though that there were incidents that probably of violence, but that I guess the slave owners in Baltimore did not want to commit some violence against the people here in this side, because other people will see it, right? And so that different, even within the state, it was kind of the different treatment between what Eastern Shore slaves suffer and what city slaves suffer.
No, that's true. Before we leave the preface, I just want one quote that one sentence that I thought was just brilliant from this gentleman, Garrison Boston. Quote: "A slaveholder's profession of Christianity is a palpable imposture. He is a felon of the highest grade. He is a man-stealer. It is of no importance what you put in the other scale. So I thought, okay, he sets the tone.
Yeah.
There's no, yeah. Sorry, Kylie, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, I want to keep us where we were because we had this, we got a question that I think is actually super relevant to where we are right now, which is, could Michelle and the panel speak to some of the reasons why prisons specifically ban this title and other similar titles in an effort to control those they are incarcerating?
So that was what I had my finger on the page. It says on page 41 in the version of the book that I have, it says, very soon after I went to live with Mr. and Mrs. Oles, she very kindly commenced to teach me the ABC. After I had learned this, she assisted me in learning to spell words of 3 or 4 letters. Shortly, it goes on to talk a little bit about her, but then it goes on to say that her husband, the slave master, quickly stopped her, and he said, if you give an N word an inch, he will take an L. So an L was about 45 inches. So sometimes we say you give him an inch, they'll take a yard. It says an N word should know nothing but to obey his master, to do as he is told. Learning would spoil the best N word in the world. Now, said he, if you teach the N word, speaking of myself, how to read, there would be no keeping him. And we know that looking at statistics, many of the people who are incarcerated are illiterate. And teaching them to read gives them power. You can escape in a book. You may not be able to escape your prison walls, but you can escape in your mind. And it takes you to other places. It broadens your horizons. It gives you hope. Just being able to read gives you power. And if you allow prisoners to have that power, then anything is possible. But that's happening in the prisons. But I liken this to what is happening in our school systems. African American children have, it's among the lowest literacy rates. It's getting worse throughout the country. And it's almost as if it's gotten worse since COVID. And it's almost as if the teachers, I don't want to say teachers don't care, but given some of the conditions of our children, and none of our children, no matter what their conditions are today, none of them are in the conditions that this man lived in. But our children, some of our children are illiterate. Black and brown children are have very low reading skills, and I feel like it's almost intentional that nobody's pushing them, that nobody's encouraging them, because the people who can read have the power. And it's scary to me that in this world of getting rid of African American AP courses, that's happening in one of our neighboring states.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one that I know is Oklahoma. They're getting rid of AP African American history. Books like this, and as Nick said, that it's been banned in many states. This book's been banned in many states. A book that tells you that you have power if you learn to read. And it's being taken out of the hands of people who don't necessarily feel like learning to read is important. And it is troubling to me that we have, and I'm not calling anybody out, but we have many African American and people of color who are leading our school systems. And even they don't see the importance of making sure our children are able to read. We have kids graduating from high school who can't even read on a 3rd grade level. It is shameful that we are allowing this to happen in this country.
Hear, hear. There's nothing else to say. And it just, it's funny. We talked about hope before we started, right?
Mhm.
Just right. And, when I think 180 years ago, we've come far, but the same things that are being debated now or fought over is exactly in this book. I mean, I can, list some of the things, but we have hope. I have not given up on hope, but it's just, history is so important.
Yes.
Because history shows us the path forward.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't understand, if we don't remember, if we don't know, then what is to become? What are we going to look like 180 years from now? Are we still going to be talking about the same things?
Right.
Not having learned?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I agree. Reading and just some of those fundamentals are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask this question. I'm just wondering too, because that's what is it? I think there was a documentary long that thing that maybe several years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, about the 13th Amendment that was in Netflix, and one of the things in that 13th Amendment gave, even though that it prohibited slavery, but with an exemption of prisons, and so it could. I don't know. Could the banning of this book also be tied to that section? And because if the prisoners or people there, in a way, they can't be classified that way in sometimes because they have no rights. They are forced to work for minimum payment, cents per hour or something. That's what I kind of read.
Well, not all prisons people are forced to work.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying. Oh, I know. Just there's a couple of articles that I read that there's some prisons, that certain people are providing labor to big corporations for minimum amount of payment. So and you have this access to this book, you can kind of connect your situation at that point with probably the experience that is written in this book. I don't know. I'm just throwing it. Probably also that might play a role too. Not sure. I'm just.
That's interesting.
I'm just stretching it, but
No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I have to think through it because this is the first that I've heard that it's banned in prisons, and so hearing Michelle's explanation and really trying to process, it's fascinating.
And I think also, like, to what extent is content that might be upsetting removed, banned, not provided, so as to keep everybody
Upsetting to who, Kyla?
Upsetting to the prisoners. Something that's upsetting in order to keep people from taking a stand. Like, it's a power. To me, it seems like a power play that to not provide difficult content. And I mean, heavy emphasis on the quotes, that it is saying that if we have people in prison who are reading about abuse, misuse, the same experiences that people in prison are experiencing, that
but they watch TV. They watch upsetting football games.
Well, I don't mean what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. Please understand.
I've given it up after the race norming.
No. I'm not saying that that's like that I believe that an incarcerated person cannot handle reading the book. I'm talking about who are the decision makers, what's behind the decision makers thinking about this. And, are you trying to me, it seems like there's a lot of things going on in the prison system that is about quelching independence and
it's about managing inmates. I mean, I guess I don't have enough information. But I'm going to go start looking after this. I really don't have enough information to pose a theory.
Oh, I
and
was speculating without information. I didn't know we
and
needed
I
information.
would, you know, Kyla, I would say, because this book isn't real. I mean, you know, he talks about the whippings that people got, but nothing like some other books.
Right, right.
And movies that I'm sure that they've seen. I
That's my
think this
point.
really is
Right.
about, because he said I mean, basically what this book is, as Renee was saying, it gives you some hope, because all that he endured, all that he saw around him, never having his mother. I mean, you know, she would maybe lay in the bed with him, well, on the floor with him at night. But this book, like, yeah, it says it's a tool for self-empowerment. It's a
Mhm,
tool that says, you know what, I'm in this condition, but this isn't
Right.
as bad as it could be. And let me go ahead and educate myself. Let me make use of this time here. And while I am making use of my time in this place, I am expanding my mind. I am giving myself hope. I am encouraging myself. I am allowing myself not to lose my mind. Because I think even somewhere in the book, he says that, you know, he thought, you know, I'm just going to kill myself.
That's right.
mhm.
And, but he continued. He understood what he had to do. I can tell you the one thing that made me mad. It took him so long to follow me. Even after I thought, yes, he learned to write. He's leaving now, you know, and he didn't. He did.
Right.
You know, it's biding his time, and just the knowledge that he was gaining for everything that from everything he experienced. I mean, because that's what happens with us. You know,
Right.
our belief system comes from everything that we've experienced.
That's
We
right.
are who we are because of what we've experienced. You know, he may not have been the abolitionist that he became if he had gone too soon. But I honestly think it is to hold the prisoners down. Let's not give them a book that's going to empower them to get smarter, not to rebel, but to just be smarter.
Social control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have a question, and I know we're kind of, but this is just such a relevant timely question. So we have a question here from Dan Hamlin. If in the past there was a legally enforced system that is now recognized as an abomination, could there currently be a legally enforced system that is an abomination?
In the past, there was a legally enforced system that is now recognized. Could there be a legally enforced system? Stay tuned, Daniel Hamlin. We're going to have an event. Is it April 7th? About the children, Mount.
Oh, April 3rd. April 3rd.
April 3rd.
But
They had no voice. This
Yes,
is
there we
April
go.
3rd, my fight
Yes,
for
yes,
Alabama's
Daniel.
forgotten children.
Yes, Daniel.
Okay. So I mean, just I'm just thinking about the question too. Is that I know in the past, I mean, one of them just going this book, we know that slavery, how we have a view of slavery now than in the past, right? But how society is going now, that we are this people that are trying to kind of erase, in this case slavery, or in other case the Holocaust, so we don't even know whether in what could happen in 30 and 40 years, because that how things are going now, maybe not necessarily the slavery of the 1800s, but it's some other type of form of slavery, how society is moving forward from erasing certain things, from not acknowledging it, because they're not acknowledging it never happened. And so, I don't know. That's a good question to me, and we'll see how things go in 40 years, 50.
Well, see, but here's the thing. History always repeats itself. This is not a new phenomenon.
Oh, no.
Trying to erase history. This happened within 20 years after the Civil War ended,
Mhm.
the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yep.
That's why in history, fast forward 100 and whatever years, 100 and however long ago I was in high school, right? So from the time they did it, I was taught that the Civil War was because of states' rights, which is a lie. As an adult, that I'm learning, that was a lie. But that was the Daughters of the Confederacy who got into the school systems and said, we're tired of feeling bad or people looking down, right? So they changed it, but history repeats, right? So now with what people use as a derogatory term of being woke, right? This is part of the cultural wars that are happening, and it's not a derogatory term,
Right.
but right. So people are waking up like, wait a minute, that was all of that we were taught for 100 years was absolutely a lie. In the own words of everybody from the day, their own words, it was about slavery, nothing more. So in answer to your question, we can try to erase history, but you can't erase every book. You can't erase every digital thing.
Right.
We have shown in this time now that we're uncovering everything, and now trying to bury. We have to acknowledge who we are. It's not a bad thing to acknowledge who we are. It is not a bad thing to acknowledge who we are as Americans. It is not derogatory. It is not making people feel bad. It is acknowledging the truth and saying, okay, we're in this relationship together. We acknowledge the truth. We acknowledge the hurt. Now can we move forward?
And let's face it, America wouldn't even be here had there not been in the condition that it's in, had it not been for slavery, because it was on the backs of the slaves. I'm getting ready to put something out there that's pretty radical. So just go with me for the ride for a minute.
Okay, fasten my seatbelt. Okay.
I don't know that we'll see slavery as it was in the 1800s. But I dare to say that we are seeing a form of slavery now. And it is in the form of making drugs legal. And before, so we've made marijuana legal in many places. And you can buy marijuana and go in dispensaries. And some places you have to have medical cards, some places you don't. But how long before you go the next step? How long before, okay, you know what, you can get fentanyl? How long before it is the United States allows so many things to happen, but it's not that a human being is controlling your mind. We are allowing drugs to control our minds. We are allowing alcohol to control our minds and hold us prisoners. And there are some people, I'm sure there are some drug addicts now who are saying, you know what? Well, it's legal now, so I can do it. So it's someone who may have been clean for several years now may be saying, well, you know what? It's legal. I won't even get in trouble. It's okay. Just like people who are alcoholics. Nobody says anything's necessarily wrong with an alcoholic because alcohol was legal. And so we have people and we all know about what's happening, especially since COVID, with people experiencing mental illness and not getting help and nobody seeking them out. To me, it's almost like people are saying, we're going to allow people to be in these conditions, not help them. And that is a form of keeping people confined and in prison. By not teaching our children, that is a form of slavery. The child that is in school and not being taught to read, that child is not going to be a success as an adult. We also know that if the child the average person in prison is illiterate, and if those who can read are reading at about a third grade level, what does that say about our society? Mm-hmm. So we've created some prisons or a form of slavery for today. Doesn't look the same. The shackles are different. And how we are controlling people is different, but it's still a form of slavery. And we've got to find as a society a way to help people break those shackles. And back to, we can't let some people read this book because they'll understand, you know what, I can break these shackles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't disagree with you, Michelle.
I have
maybe I'll say something controversial here.
Well, I'm about to say a whole bunch of things, but I'm going to start.
Yeah.
But and I've got the keys, so nobody can kick me off of the program. So here we go. One of the things I really did want to say is to do with curriculum, what's in schools. So I'm not taking a position in this moment about that. I do want to say for viewers, you have control over curriculum, right? You have control, and your control is in your school board elections. It is getting involved on the local level, paying attention to who is running for school board. It is running yourself. If you're not willing to run yourself, it is backing campaigns. It is finding support. It is knocking on doors. It is getting involved in local level politics. And that is true whether or not you are able to vote or choose to vote. Of course, we encourage those who are able to vote, however you vote, to exercise that right. But if you are not able to exercise that right, to get involved in campaigns on a local level, because your school board impacts the curriculum that is presented. So we're talking about the Daughters of the Confederacy and the getting into school systems and convincing school systems to teach history a certain way that I know my spouse has talked about, having grown up with the same things that you grew up learning, Renee, this lie about the Civil War. And so I just really wanted to take a moment to say, like, there is power over here. And when we talk about books being banned by school boards and school, I could go on. I got to mute myself. So I did want to say that. And I also, and Ms. Vivian agrees with Michelle. I do have one more thing that I like to say, and this is a controversial topic, but I will say, Michelle, you did speak to something that speaks to my heart, which is I am from British Columbia in Canada, and British Columbia has just legalized small amounts of hard drugs. So you talk about, could it happen? British Columbia has done that. They have legalized that. And so I think that the idea, and I'm just going to share what I think the idea is a harm reduction approach, which is to try to have safe supply, because what we are losing people in British Columbia at rapid rates due to fentanyl in the drug supply. The side effect of that is what you were talking about, which is the normalization of drug use. And that if it's, and that's the side effect then is, oh, it's normal, it's legal, it's fine. I was just in British Columbia, and like everyone and their mom, including my mom, was talking about edibles. And I was like, what is, like, wow.
But,
Mom,
but
I just called you out. Okay. But it was so mind-blowing, because that's when I left British Columbia, that was not like part of the normal narrative, and it is definitely, there's some cognitive dissonance around that. Anyway, okay, Jose, go ahead.
No, because I mean, I have no opinion. I mean, my opinion, I don't mind if it legalized, not legalized it. I think at the end of the day, it's personal responsibility. You're gonna do it if either it's legal or not legal. If you want to do it, you want to do it. But I mean, I think I do agree with you, Kyla, the reason why maybe they stay doing it. Plus, at the end of the day, you also want to collect taxes too, right? From things. But going with the education piece, yeah, people can get involved, but how now? I mean, you see here, even in the county or another area, the budget for a school, it's increasing every year for jurisdiction. So I think the school system has to become wiser in how they use the money, because sometimes they go and pay for the administrative personnel, but the school budget has been increasing every year, and so sometimes I also think that it's personal responsibility in the household. The parents has to be deeply involved and not rely on the educational system to teach their kids certain things, because the money is there. The states put in the money, the counties put in the money, but you also know that the number of people going to public school is also reducing, because that the private school are getting an increase on that number of new students. So I I understand that we have to get involved in it, but I don't think that we as a parent has to rely on the school system to teach our kids certain things. I think we have to be responsible in-house as well, not just relying on
Yeah,
the schools.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that we have to also remember, Jose, though, that not every parent has that ability. Because a lot of our kids have parents who can't read. They have parents who may be drug addicted. They have parents who are in prison. They may be in foster care or group homes, and they don't have that ability. Um, and so I think it is, starting programs that either in the schools after school, it may be some other nonprofits starting that have the children reading books like this to show them that it doesn't matter what condition you're in, no matter what your circumstances are, no matter whether you can read now or not, there's still hope. We can get you to where you need to be so that when you come out of school, or even while in school, where is it? Somewhere was it Alabama? They have a 12-year-old. I mean, he ran for mayor in 12, or he got involved in politics when he was 12, and now he is 18, and is the mayor of this
That's right.
tiny
Yeah.
little city.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I saw that.
yeah. So it's, you can be what you can dream to be. And I think in this book, getting back to the book, the
Oh yeah.
it says somewhere is he used to dream of freedom.
Yeah.
So, it, and I think that's what books do. Books encourage us to dream. Some of us can travel. Some of us have never left our front porches. But guess what? We've traveled to many different countries through books.
Yeah.
Speak other languages because we learned through books or now audio material. So, it is really important that we don't take books away from our children and we teach our children how to read. It is scary to me that it's just not being encouraged the way that it should be. And
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, some of our teachers, you have 30 kids in a classroom. Some of the kids may not be able to sit too long. I just, and maybe it's classroom management that they need to teach. I don't know. And I'm not a teacher, so I don't think I can do it. But I do think for those who have that gift of teaching, and for those who are able to work with our young people, reading needs to be a part of every program. It just needs to be even extracurricular programs. It's, before you start practicing for football, need you to read 10 minutes from a book and then tell me what you read. It's that important. And especially looking at what's happening with the statistics in school, in reading and in math. And I just don't believe that kids are living, even kids who are experiencing trauma in our cities, seeing people killed, maybe even in front of them. It's the same thing he experienced. And he did it without parents. He didn't even know who his father was. Speculated that it was the master, but certainly he was not a nurturing father. His mother was taken from him immediately. He was raised by his grandmother until he was 7, I think.
Yeah.
And then he then became a worker on master's plantation.
Yeah.
And the things that he saw was something about the blood on the gateposts.
Yes.
Seeing that blood because somebody had been whipped there.
Mhm.
He experienced trauma just like our kids are experiencing trauma.
Yeah.
And look at what he accomplished. The only thing in my mind was that it took him too long to get away. And I go
Well,
back He did it when it was time to do it. But
That's right.
He got caught the first time when he was planning, though. You
yeah,
know, so probably, you know, if
That's
you
right.
have that in your you have that in your mind, that will deter you
Discourage
from
you,
taking some actions until it's like you say, you waited for the, I guess, perfect moment.
yeah,
Yeah. Talbot, was it Talbot County, I think?
mhm,
Yeah, Talbot County.
yeah,
I do.
I
Sorry,
was
just really-
struck by when he's talking about his time with the Hughes family in Baltimore, and when he that's where he learned to read. But we've talked a little bit about her, right? The wife, she came she was a working person, had never been exposed to people that owned slaves, and remember how he describes how he greeted her, and she had this kind and loving face, right? And then the husband says, you can't, right? The part that you read. But what I was struck with, and it is true, and it is kind of indicative of where we are today because we haven't dealt with this issue. But he said, slavery proved as injurious to her as it did to me. Profound. And he talks about how her character changed, how even the look on her face, how she became this hardened, ugly, evil person from this, as he described as angelic, and the first person who was white to show him kindness, greeting him at the door, right? But isn't that a reflection of us, right? When we do things that are injurious to another person, it is as injurious to us. And so when we're talking about our national conversations, it is the same. So I just thought that was profound. And he kind of talks about that throughout the book in different ways, but really just saying what we're saying, what, you know, all of these books that we have read and authors that we have, right? The original sin in this country, you know, the soul of the nation, where all the different authors, it is true. And Frederick Douglass himself saw it, that it was injurious to everybody, not just to the slave.
Can I just I know I'm looking at time, and I do want to let people know to please, if we've been trying to address questions as they come in, but also if you have questions, please send them to us. I do want to skip over the entire book to go from the preface to the appendix, really, because I think this, again, there is a part, I'm going to read this, I highlighted it, I'm going to read this whole thing, because again, it's so timely. And that's one of the things about the whole book, is that is so, and Renee started this, you know, when she talked about how long ago this book came out. And here we are 180 years later, and so many of the themes are through here. So I'm just going to read. Okay, that's my preamble. So this is from the appendix. What I have said respecting and against religion, I mean strictly to apply to the slave-holding religion of this land, and with no possible reference to Christianity proper. For between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference. So wide that to receive the one as good, pure, and holy is of necessity. To reject the other as bad, corrupt, and wicked. To be the friend of the one is of necessity to be the enemy of the other. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. I therefore hate the corrupt, slaveholding, women whipping, cradle plundering, partial and hypocritical Christianity of this land. Indeed, I see no reason but the most deceitful one for calling the religion of this land Christianity. I look upon it as the climax of all the misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels. I'm going to skip a little bit, but I am filled with unutterable loathing when I contemplate the religious pomp and show, together with the horrible inconsistencies which everywhere surround me. We have men stealers for ministers, women whippers for missionaries, and cradle plunderers for church members. And
when I read that, do you know what I thought? 180 years ago, Frederick Douglass was saying, you can't sit on the fence. You have to be an anti-racist.
Racist, yes.
That's what he was saying 180 years ago. It's not enough to say, oh, they are horrible. Slavery is horrible. He is calling it out. I thought, oh my goodness. It's.
Oh, she dropped the mic there.
I did.
Probably I should drop the book.
Things are dropping off of my table here.
Yeah, but it's home. Like say, it's so applicable. It's so kind of similar, applicable to what we're going on now, especially how certain actions are being taken and just behind the religion, right? But when you start going through it, it's like, wait, is this the religion that we been taught? Like, this Christianity? But it's similar. It's just a definition of Christianity that suit their goal. So yeah.
I started sort of seeing like parallels between sort of the current Christian nationalism movement, and it's this book is timely. I can't say that enough.
And how they be and how some people, how ignorant they appear to be, right? Because these people that are claiming these Christian nationalists are doing a lot of things that are not Christian-like, but people are believing them. People are believing what they say, and even though they don't show they don't act their religion, I guess.
Right. And another similarity, sort of this trope I'm trying to find, because I marked it, this trope about things aren't really that bad because the slaves sing such beautiful songs.
I highlighted that. Yep.
It's like things have not changed. They have not changed. I'll find exactly where it is.
It was in the beginning. Yeah.
I remember
that. It
was in the beginning.
What page is it?
I'm just trying to find it.
Most when they are most unhappy. Oh, somebody says they're singing because they're happy. And then it goes on to say,
right. What page is it, Michelle?
I'm on page 26 in my book.
Okay.
It says slaves sing most when they are most unhappy. The songs of the slave represent the sorrows of his heart, and he is relieved by them only as an aching heart is relieved by its tears. At least such is my experience. I have often sung to drown my sorrow, but seldom to express my happiness.
And then page 28, right? Page 28 is the rest of that, the trope. I've often been utterly astonished since I came to the North to find persons who could speak of the singing among slaves as evidence of their contentment and happiness. It is possible to conceive of a greater mistake. Slaves sing most when they are most unhappy. So I thought tropes.
Yeah. So I found something else that I highlighted that resonates with what's happening today. It says, I speak advisedly when I say that killing a slave or any colored person in Talbot County, Maryland, is not treated as a crime either by the courts or the community.
That's right.
And that is still the same today.
Yeah. And remember the whole escapade when he's working in Baltimore as an apprentice, and again, parallels about the tropes today. All of the people, right? There were lots of Black men who were slaves who were lent out to work there, right? And then there were some free Black men, and then all of a sudden the white carpenters and everybody said, we're not working with them. They're trying to take our jobs. They're trying to take over the country.
Yep.
Parallels.
Yeah. And they and I also want to talk about the glimpses of white allies that are in this book, because it was the Irishmen that said, you should run away.
Yeah, get on a ship, a fine person like you.
Yeah.
And the little boys, right?
He talked about the little boys that taught him to write. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was one of the things.
He 21, you'll be free.
Exactly. He didn't want to move because of the little guys, the little white guys that were his age that had taught him. Well, he tricked them into teaching him how to read. Right. But they had formed real friendships, right? And the conversations he says that they talked about slavery and how wrong it was and fascinating.
Yeah.
Allies, exactly.
There's so much in this. I mean, what is it? 100 and with the appendix, Kyla, that you reading that
105, 106, yeah.
What, 100? I have 124 pages.
Okay. You have bigger print. I'm joking. Yeah, it's a really good book. I actually identified as I was going through parallels to modern day slavery. Daniel's question about legalized. So that's not legal, but the way you break somebody down, the whole, it's a method. It is a program. I'm not going to tell people where to go to learn, but there are books and songs out there that teach you how to be a trafficker, how you break somebody's spirit, what you do. It is exactly what our history was. So, throughout my book, I'm like, oh, that's just like, modern day slavery, that tactic. Oh, yes, there it is. Right. That thing about over Christmas time, the break that the slaves would get from Christmas to New Year's. Remember that part?
Yeah.
That is so, let me look here. Let me see if I can find it, because that is so analogous to slavery. Here we go. A form of control, right? It was around starts like page 69, 70. Like you have the Romeo pimps, right? Which is, what we have today. I mean, we have all types, but that's a type of pimp.
I have it. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah. All of that thing about, right, the drinking and the, giving, apparent freedom, but really not. Yes.
So he does do a fairly long summary, but all the fun, all the wonderful things that they're able to do over Christmas. And these holidays serve as conductors or safety valves to carry off the rebellious spirits of enslaved humanity. But for these, the slave would be forced up to the wildest desperation, and woe betide the slaveholder the day he ventures to remove or hinder the operation of those conductors. I warn him that in such an event, the spirit will go forth in their midst, more to be dreaded than the most appalling earthquake. The holidays are part and parcel of the gross fraud, wrong, and inhumanity of slavery. They are professedly a custom established by the benevolence of the slaveholders, but I undertake to say it is the result of selfishness and one of the grossest frauds committed upon the downtrodden slave. They did not give the slaves this time because they would not like to have their work during its continuance, but because they know it would be unsafe to deprive them of it. And it goes on, but it's such a sign of social control, which, there's not a Marxist point of view that that there's just enough of a social safety net to keep people from rebelling, but not enough to actually make any difference. And I think it's the same. It's really the same idea of social control. I just want to say, I'm happy to keep talking, but if we're not going to keep talking, I do want to address the fact that we have some questions that have been answered in the chat. And if you're on, I will say if you're on Facebook, you probably don't know what's happening. So I'm just going to really quickly, we can continue, but let me just address these questions. Susan Roberts asked us to list the books for the diversity dialogue that we'll be discussing in the coming months. So we do have, this is a monthly series. We're doing 6 this year. We're doing, so I'm just going to quickly review them for March, on March 28th. It's the last Tuesday every month, everybody. So in March for Women's History Month, we are doing Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong. In April for Arab American History Month, Heritage Month, we're doing Out of Place by Edward Said. We're taking a little break for the summer. In August, we're reading Big Girl by Mecca Jamila Sullivan. Last Tuesday of September for Hispanic Heritage Month, we're reading The Man Who Could Move Clouds by Ingrid Rojos Contreras. And then in October, as a lead into Native American Indigenous Heritage Month, we're reading There by Tommy Orange. That's very fast, but those of you who are on Facebook only got half of those answers, so I wanted to explain it.
Kyla, do you want to, we can put it on our website?
Yeah, so we can go to
people,
You can also come visit us. And I'll put this on the line too, civilrights.mypgc.us. And the other question that we had was about the April book that was mentioned. And so I just want to address that as well. Renee did mention this book we're doing on April 3rd. We are having this author, Denny Abbott, come to talk about They Had No Voice, his fight for Alabama's forgotten children. That is on April 3rd, and it will be a virtual event as well. Before I totally wrap us up, Michelle, I feel like you had a closing comment. Is that correct?
I was going to say that early in the program, Renee mentioned history repeats itself. And I just wanted to say that in the Jewish tradition, they honor their history and they make sure their children know their history. And the reason and most of the Jewish holidays are really around sad occasions. And, are in remembrance of sad occasions. However, it is their belief that if you teach your children their history, it won't repeat itself. And I think that's something that we need to remember. We need to not keep these books away from our kids. We need to share the history. We need to talk about our experiences, and whatever we've experienced, good and bad, need to be shared, especially the bad, so that it does not repeat itself.
These are wonderful. I love Daniel's comment. Thank you, Nick, for that. Yeah, history is our friend, not our enemy.
That's
And
right.
we all need to educate ourselves on our history. There are lots of resources out there, lots of books that are being written, that have been written, that really, really teach us what we didn't learn in school. I'm talking about a full spectrum, not just slavery, everything. Because as Michelle said, reading is what frees everybody, is what makes us understand, right? The frauds are harder to perpetrate against us if we know the truth. Then we can decide, okay, yeah, we accept that, or fine, right? But learning the truth for ourselves is the most important thing we can do, and not stick our head in the sand or say, oh, it's those people, there they go again.
Right.
All of that wokeness, or all of that, oh, look at those.
Right.
You know, right? On both sides. So we have to arm ourselves and be responsible and start asking the hard questions. Just as I loved what Daniel said, right? The truth will set us free after we, but first it will make you angry. And that's the truth. Anger is not a bad emotion. It can be a positive and an emotion to catapult us to the next level.
I have witnessed that.
Pardon?
No, I said I have witnessed that, even with coworkers. Then, the truth, you get the truth, you get angry, but you kind of come to a set. So I get what Dan is saying.
I think it's actually, if you run from it, you can never move through it.
That's right.
And so you never grow. You can never. And also, as we're talking about with history, like being able to, like, not be terrified of it. It can be painful. It can be shameful. It can be devastating. It can be enraging. And then what do we do today? What do we do today that ensures we're in a better situation, that we're doing what we can to create a more robust and loving society? And we have a wonderful comment here. I'm going to close this out. We have a wonderful comment from Michigan, who joined us when we did the book discussion for What If. Michelle, that was way back when, 4 years ago.
That was exactly 4 years ago.
That was our first one.
Yeah.
And so, Liz, thank you so much for joining us from Michigan. We love having people from all over, and we've been very, very fortunate, Michelle and I, and now Jose and Renee and I, and guests like Michelle, to have such wonderful people joining us every month to talk and engage in the chat and just move along with us as we go through, complex and difficult conversations and discussions and learning. So this book Renee's holding up right now, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. You've heard us talk about it and around it, and it obviously brought up a whole bunch of amazing issues and important issues for us. You can get it from our friends, the library, PGCMLS.info. They have it. They also have it on their Libby app, and I'm pretty sure that a library can, even if you don't live here, Liz, I think you can get a virtual library card, and you'll be able to read that online. And of course, you can also purchase it wherever you are. We like to also hold books in our hands. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and having such a wonderful conversation in the chat. The chat conversation over here on YouTube and Facebook was wonderful. It's so great that you all engaged with us. And Renee and Jose, thank you for being part of this series every month for the last almost year now. And Michelle, we wouldn't be here without you, buddy. We would not.
Thank you for having me back. This was so great. It was so great.
So wonderful.
I miss you.
Don't be a stranger. You can join us on the diversity dialogue.
Okay.
I'll send you. You got the list. I'll send you the list. We'll bring you back.
Okay.
But it's so wonderful to see your face. Thank you so much for choosing to be with us from your new position and sharing your insights and your strength. It's just wonderful to have you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for telling me.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.